With you, let's talk about the iPhone. Obviously, this driving 2/3 of revenues for the company. Are you concerned that sales were flat?
No, I mean, I actually think when you look at the quarter here, overall, it was fairly mixed. I'd say the one negative really was those iPhone numbers. But, you know, it's one of those quarters, I think, where you can only put so much emphasis on the iPhone. You know, you, of course, have that major launch later this year, and we think the entire miss here it can be attributed to the fact that consumers are really holding off for that next generation iPhone device. So overall, I mean, you're seeing a little bit of hit on the stock price, but it's something we would actually look past.
I did speak with Apple CFO Luca Maestri, who talked up channel inventory. They sold 1.2 million iPhones worth of channel inventory, which, if you consider those numbers, actually brings the number slightly up. David, what's your take?
Well, if I understand correctly, the sales outside of China actually grew, and Cook said that it's because they were seeing anticipation of future product being a problem. And it's just amazing to me how in China they are even more status conscious and technology conscious than almost any other part of the world, and they love Apple even still. But I tend, like Angela, to take a big picture view. This is not that big of a deal. I mean, if this company can make the move to services and software, which is its big shift they have to make to get their margin, their multiple up, then basically they're going to have a wonderful future, and I do think they'll come out with a great phone in the fall.
Let's talk a little bit about China since you mentioned it. We did see a 14% year-over-year decline in China. I talked to Luca Maestri about this, and he played up the positive things that they're seeing here. He said, we see a lot of positive signs in China. The iPhone 7, the best-selling smartphone in China. The iPhone 7 Plus also doing extremely well. Their services business hitting an all-time record there. Mac business growing double digits there. And he also said that we expect our performance in China to continue to improve over the fiscal year. He said that the second half of last year, they saw a greater decline than they've seen so far in the first half of this year. Angelo, you know, talk to us about what's happening in China and whether or not you're concerned.
Yeah, I mean, I think when it comes to China, you know, the consumers out there are, of course, a lot more price sensitive. I think you've got a lot more options these days coming out of China, given the emergence of many device manufacturers out in the local China region. That being said, when you actually look at how Apple has recently performed in the mainland China region, they've actually done very well. It's more along the other areas of the greater China area, like Taiwan, among other areas that have really taken the hit for Apple in that business. But overall, when you kind of look at that segment, at least it's performing better than it did earlier last year. So that's positive, and we do think that business starts returning to growth as you progress later into the year and you actually start seeing aesthetic changes to the next generation device.
Overall, you're also seeing a greater shift towards the larger sized iPhone, and Luca Maestri pointed out that this is the first time the bigger iPhone actually has a dramatically different feature in the updated camera, and the fact that more customers are buying the bigger phone means that the average selling price of the iPhone is going up. I do want to talk about what's going on with capital. Of course, they boosted the share buyback program, boosted the capital return program, but there's a lot of speculation about whether or not Apple is going to bring cash back to the United States. $257 billion Apple has now in cash overseas. And so there's a big question about, you know, what's going on with the Trump tax plan and whether or not that will impact Apple. David, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I just continue to be amazed that a company could be this big, this profitable, and have problems like they have. Yeah, I think they will need to be seen as patriotic, and if there's a chance to bring money back, they will do that. But to me, I would go back to what I said before. The real question, if I was an investor in Apple, and I know some analysts have recently been talking more about this, is can they shift to be seen as more than just a device maker? Because their multiple is so low compared to Facebook and Google that somehow they've got to find a way to change that delta. And they don't even have to make very big of a difference for their stockholders to see an incredible increase, even from this astonishing $750 billion market cap they have today. So yes, they'll bring money back. That they have $250 billion to play with is astonishing. But the bigger questions are longer term still.
And we did ask Luca Maestri on our call whether or not they've laid the groundwork for planning to bring some cash back, depending on what happens with the legislation. He said it is not something that we are going to be speculating on right now because very much will depend on the details of what might get enacted. We obviously do a lot of scenario planning, but there is nothing to announce today. Angelo, any closing thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you kind of look at the numbers here overall, I mean, we remain very optimistic on this year's. I mean, services growth of 18%, right in line where we expected, and continues to kind of run in line of that, doubling potential over the next 4 years. And, to the point that was just referenced, I think as Apple continues to expand outside of the iPhone base, or outside of the iPhone kind of revenue stream, I think that's an enormous positive for the company. It's going to come from the services business.